welcome to another edition of the GM Files. Jim Duquette alongside Bobby Evans, and we are pleased to be with one of the most accomplished baseball people I think anyone would ever have the pleasure to meet, Eddie Robinson. Eddie is a former player, former scout, former general manager, so he fits in perfectly with this show. Eddie, nice to see you, and thanks for the time today. How are you today?
Well, I'm fine, thank you. Happy to be with you.
It's a pleasure to see you. Thanks for joining us.
So let's get into it, Eddie, with your career, because you've had such a distinguished career, both as let's start with a player, because your 13 years career, you were an all-star, 4 times? You were obviously a really good hitter, first base. You drove in over 100 runs, 3 different seasons. Tell me if I'm wrong on any of this now. Hit over 20 home runs, 5 seasons. And you missed a couple of years along the way because you served in the war. So 13-year career, very accomplished. And you hit over 300, I noticed, in 1950 as a 29-year-old. I'm curious from your perspective, is there an accomplishment during your days, let's start with Cleveland, that stand out to you that are most memorable?
Well, you know, when you played as long as I did, there are a lot of memorable moments. When I look back on it, I guess the fact that I got the base hit that drove in the winning run in the 1948 World Series is, I guess I'm proudest of that.
Well, you had Al Rosen as a rookie. I don't even know if he made the World Series roster, but he was a rookie back in 1948, and ultimately was on the Indians team that played the Giants in the '54 World Series. Do you remember much about Al Rosen, who was later the general manager of the Giants in the '80s?
Well, I remember a lot about Al Rosen. He was a rookie. I don't know if he played in any games at 48, but he had a great minor league season that year. And he came up at the end of the year, I believe, and joined us in September. But Al and I were friends, played against each other. I was traded at the end of that season to Washington, and Al became the third baseman for the Cleveland Indians, and we played against each other for 7-8 years after that. And then we were general managers at the same time. He was general manager of the San Francisco Giants, and I was general manager of the Atlanta Braves and the Texas Rangers.
Very good.
That's quite the story. No, we can't see you now, but we can hear you.
I know, but why don't you see me?
Oh, there you go.
Back. There you're back.
There we go. Yes.
Now you see me.
There he is.
This is altogether new for me. I've never done this before.
That's okay. That's all right. You're doing great. What was it like having Bob Feller as a friend and a teammate? I'm curious.
Well, you know, I was a little bit in awe of Bob Feller. When I was in high school, he was in the big leagues pitching and striking out people. And then we went in the service. I was in the service with him briefly at Norfolk, Virginia, and then he got transferred, and I remained in Norfolk. But Bob was a very, very nice guy and an excellent pitcher, as you know, one of the best of all time. And he was the first guy that enlisted when the United States got into World War II.
Yeah, well, you serving in the war, and obviously a huge sacrifice. What was it like coming back from the war, and how were you treated? How were you received? How did you feel about your teammates that didn't go? You know, when you got back from the war, how was that feeling?
Well, I was out of the service when when the treaty was signed. The war was over. I had a paralyzed leg from an operation, and they had discharged me, but I, 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 I'd have to say I was kind of unhappy. I had an operation in the Navy that practically took my baseball career away from me. They paralyzed my right leg, and finally had a second operation on it, and they operated on the nerve in the leg and cut an inch of the nerve out and sutured the nerve back together. And it finally, the nerve regrew and regenerated, and then I was able to play. In 1946, Cleveland sent me to Baltimore, and I had a great year. I played in 1946. I played against Jackie Robinson, who was playing in Montreal, Canada, and was going up to the Dodgers the next year. And I also played against Bobby Brown, who was a dear friend of mine, just passed away, and his funeral is tomorrow.
Yeah, sorry for your loss there, Eddie. I know he was a friend of yours.
Bobby was a great human being. He was a good doctor. He was a good American League president and a great friend.
Yeah, I'm sorry for your loss. You mentioned Jackie Robinson. What was that like, playing against Jackie during that period of time?
Well, that was a big first in the United States, having a black player playing organized baseball. And he played for Montreal and did an excellent job. Their team won the pennant and the little World Series against the American Association. He suffered through a lot of indignities. A lot of the players yelled at him and gave him a bad time, but he was a very good human being, and he stood up to it, and he was a great player. And the next year he went with Brooklyn, and there was a big disturbance about that, but it all settled down, and he had a great season for Brooklyn. Played wonderfully for him, and he gets all the credit. I'd like to say, though, that in 1947, the year Jackie went with Brooklyn, I was with Cleveland, and we got Larry Doby on our team 2 months after Jackie joined the Dodgers. Doby joined our team, and he was black. He was a left-hand hitter, and he didn't get any acclaim as being the first American League black player. And I always thought that the press was remiss in not giving him the credit he was due. For he suffered the same indignities that Jackie Robinson suffered, and had to stay in separate hotels and eat in separate restaurants, and all the same things that Jackie suffered. But Doby, and you never hear his name mentioned.
Well, my time in the commissioner's office in the early 90s, I had the pleasure of being there when Dr. Bobby Brown was the American League president. I also had the chance to be there with Larry Doby, who was very involved with the baseball assistance team at that time. So two great, humble leaders, representatives of the game, both dearly missed. Of course, Dr. Brown more recently. But when you look back on your career and you think about meeting some of these great players, that's one thing. But another thing is to be in a barbershop quartet with some teammates. That sounds like you've got a lot more ability than just baseball.
Well, you had to have a little singing ability, but you can credit Joe Gordon with that. Joe Gordon was really the leader of our team. They acquired him in a trade with the Yankees in 1947, and he was there, of course, my first 2 years in the big leagues, and we all admired Joe, and he was an instigator. He was always doing things that we all thought was a little bit crazy, but they all worked out. He would be in a bit of a slump, and he'd say, "Give me a Thurman Tucker bat." Thurman Tucker swung the lightest and shortest bat of anybody on the team, and Joe would go up and hit with it, and he'd hit a home run. And he was just a great guy. Well, anyway, he formed this quartet, and Lefty Wiseman, our trainer, he was the bass, and Jim Hegan was our tenor, and I was the alto, I guess, and Joe was our baritone. He was the leader of the quartet, and we would sing at the drop of a hat. We'd sing in railroad stations, on the train, rainouts during the ball game. If the game was delayed, we'd get on the loudspeaker system and sing. It was just it was great being on that quartet.
That's a great memory, Eddie. Thank you for sharing that. I wanted to ask you about that because when you went to the Yankees in '54. So you were an all-star, right, in Philly in '53, and then you went to the Yankees, and you really, I mean, what a team you had. You had Yogi, Phil Rizzuto, Mickey Mantle, Hank Bauer. I mean, the names are endless. And you were what, in terms of playing, how much? It looks like you played that year 85 games. Was that difficult to go from a starter to only playing half the season?
Well, that was a crazy thing that happened. I'd played in Philadelphia the year before, and it had a pretty good year. My batting average wasn't all that good, but I hit over 20 home runs and drove in over 100 runs. And then the Yankees traded for me, and I thought that I would be the regular first baseman for the Yankees. Right. But in spring training, Bill Skowron came on. He was a young guy he came up through the minor leagues, and he turned out to be one fine young player. And he had such a good spring training that they had to give him a chance, and he took the chance and ran with it. It was something to see. We had 4 first basemen. Joe Collins, he had been there as an outfielder, first baseman. Frank Legia, who was a college player that they'd signed our high school. And if you signed and gave a guy over $10,000, you had to keep him on the roster. So they had to keep him on the roster. And of course, Skowron came on and nobody expected it. And I was there. So I got to give Stengel credit. He jostled that roster around. We all got a little playing time. I was mainly a pinch hitter. I think I led the league in pinch hits. I got 15 pinch hits that year. And I was just happy to be a Yankee. I knew I was near the end of my career. I knew that I felt that my best days were behind me. And to finish up, those years with the Yankees were great. I enjoyed being there. And I met my wife, Betty.
Wow.
In New York, and we got married, and we've been married 65 years.
Very good.
That's amazing.
Very good. In today's game, when GMs make trades, they can't keep it a secret. Players find out about being traded from Twitter, from Instagram, from teammates, from former teammates, from new teammates, from clubhouse managers, Uber drivers. I mean, there's so many different ESPN. There's so many different ways players find out about trades. You moved around quite a bit as a player, of course, served as a GM. Any unique stories about finding out about a new team that you were going to play for?
Well, I think that's a mistake. If a player hears about being traded from someone other than the team,
that's right.
I think that's a mistake. I think the player's former team, the team that trades him, owes that respect to him to call him first, so that he first knows that he has been traded. And I don't know how it happens today, but we always tried, and when I was general manager, we always tried to notify the player that the trade had been made. If we were unable to, if we tried every avenue of communications and couldn't reach him, well, then of course the newspapers would get it from the other team, the
Sure.
team that he traded to. So you can't help that. But I just think it's bad if a player is traded and the club that owned him does not notify him of it.
There's a photo of Babe Ruth in his final public appearance at Yankee Stadium, and he's walking on the field. And as I understand the story, he's using your bat as a cane as he walks on the field. That's an incredibly famous photo. Obviously, his last public appearance. How did it come that Babe Ruth had your bat as a cane that day?
Well, that picture won the Pulitzer Prize, and they were retiring his number, and that was the last time he ever visited Yankee Stadium. You want me to tell you about it?
Yes.
Is that what
Love
you
it.
want?
Love
Yes,
that story.
I went there with the Cleveland Indians. For years, the Yankees' home clubhouse was behind the third base dugout, and they decided to change, and they moved their clubhouse to the first base side of the field, the first base dugout, and they left all the lockers in the visiting clubhouse. They didn't bother to move the lockers, and Babe Ruth's locker was in the visiting clubhouse. They later removed a lot of the lockers, but they left his locker in the visiting clubhouse. And when he came there that day for the ceremony, and they were going to retire his number, he wanted to get his uniform on, sitting at his own locker that he had for years with the Yankees. Wow. So he came into the visiting clubhouse and put his uniform on. And he was a very sick man. He had his doctor with him, personal doctor. He had throat cancer, and he talked in a very kind of a raspy voice. You could tell that he was sick and he was frail and didn't have much strength. But he came out with his doctor. He came out on our bench, the Cleveland bench, and waited for the ceremonies to start. Came time for him to go up to home plate, and I could see that he needed some support. And I just reached in the bat rack, which was handily there, and I took a bat out and handed it to him. And he took the bat and walked up to home plate. And they had the ceremony, and then they took that famous picture of him standing there gazing out toward center field, and he's got the bat in his hand. And when he came back to the dugout, he handed me the bat, and I asked him if he had autographed. He said, sure. So he autographed the bat and went up into the clubhouse, and he was gone. I think he died about 6 months later. But that bat was a famous bat, and I was happy to have it. I owned it for about 30 years.
That's all right.
Well, that's an amazing story, Eddie. I tell you, that is incredible to you. It gives me goosebumps thinking about that and how it all worked out.
Let me tell you what happened to it.
Yeah.
There was a guy that was a minor partner in the Yankees. His name was Barry Halper. And Barry Halper was a Ruth collector. He had Babe Ruth's overcoat and all so many uniforms, shirts and pants and shoes. He had everything Ruth. And he wanted that bat, but I wouldn't sell it. And he said, well, Eddie, if you ever decide you're going to sell that bat, let me know. I would like to buy it from you. So as I say, I kept it for over 30 years. And at that time, in those days, memorabilia wasn't worth much. And you didn't have any idea what the Ruth bat would be worth. I never thought it would be worth $10,000. And I told my wife one day, I said, you know, I wonder what that bat is worth. And she said, I don't know. I said, well, I think I'll call Barry Halper, and I'll ask him an amount that I know he won't give me, but he'll come back with an offer, and that'll give me some idea what the bat's worth. So I did. I called Barry up. I said, Barry, I'm thinking about selling the Babe Ruth bat. He said, what do you want for it? I said, $10,000. He said, I'll have the money to you tomorrow. So the bat was gone. And since then, it sold for as high as $120,000. It was in Bob Feller's museum in Van Meter, Iowa. It was really a Bob Feller bat. It had Bob Feller printed on the bat. They didn't put signatures of pictures on bats in those days. And at the present time, it's in the Cleveland Baseball Museum in the stadium in Cleveland, Ohio.
Wow. That is
That's
some kind of story.
Wow.
That's a good one, Eddie. Thank you for sharing
long
that.
time to tell.
I love it.
That's a great story, though.
Beautiful
Hey,
story.
I wanted to ask you before we let you go, because we could talk to you forever. But when you were general manager in Atlanta, you had one of the great all-time players, right? Hank Aaron. Now, Dusty Baker, by the way, is good friends with Bobby and I. We both know Dusty really well. He was on that team too. Hank Aaron was an idol of mine, I think, of Bobby's too. What was it like having Hank Aaron on your team? And do you have a story that you could tell us about Hank?
Well, what it was like having Hank Aaron on the team was, you know, you love having a guy who hits 40 home runs on your team. And to be such a nice guy and just a regular teammate. He didn't try to portray himself any differently than any other player on the team. And all the players loved him, and we all wanted to see him break the record. But unfortunately, when I went with the Braves, he lacked about 150, 175 home runs breaking the record. But he gradually, I was with the Atlanta Braves 10 years, but 7 years Aaron was still playing there. And he kept hitting 35, 40 home runs a year, and he was creeping up on the record. And he got close to it at the end of the season. Yeah. I think it was a 1976 season that he got close to breaking the record. In fact, when the season ended, he needed only 2 home runs to break it, 1 home run to tie it. So there we were, the season was over, all the excitement was over, and we had all winter to wait until spring for him to break the record. Well, unfortunately, we were opening the season in Cincinnati, and that meant that he might break the record in Cincinnati. So Eddie Matthews was my manager, and we decided that we wouldn't play him in Cincinnati. Well, the commissioner felt, I guess, that we might do that, and he sent a person that worked in the commissioner's office to Cincinnati to make sure that that we put Aaron. He said, "You've got to play your best player." And the commissioner called me up and talked to me about it, and I wouldn't agree to it. But then when he sent Johnny Johnson, he sent Johnny Johnson, person that I knew, to Cincinnati, and Johnny called me up and talked to me about it. So Eddie and I agreed to play him, but if he hit a home run, we we're going to take him out of the lineup. Well, Hank did. He hit the first game. He hit a home run and tied the record. And we took him out of the lineup and waited until 2 more games. And then we went back to Atlanta and opened the season there. And we hoped that he would wait 2 or 3 days where we would get big attendance for him breaking the record. But doggone if he didn't hit another home run, break the record the very first game. So it was all over, but it happened at an inopportune time. A little bit more about Hank. He did not finish his career as an Atlanta Brave. He let it be known to Bill Bartholomew and me that he would like to be traded back to Milwaukee. He wanted to go into the Hall of Fame as a Milwaukee Brave, where he had played in one World Series and been such a great player. So we accommodated him and sent him back to Milwaukee, and that he went into the Hall of Fame as a Milwaukee Brave.
Great story. Great story. What a pleasure to be with you today.
Yes, Eddie, thank you so much.
Well, I'm sorry we had such a mess up at the beginning, but we got it straightened out.
We got it straight. This was fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, my son Mark is quite good at these things.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Mark.
We thank him. And you have a podcast coming out, right? So
yeah,
we'll promote that.
Forget my podcast. The golden age of baseball.
The golden age of baseball. All right, we're going to promote that and help get some listeners, including the two of us here. We're going to get on that right away.
Well, I think I've had some very good letters from people who've listened to it, and I find it's fun doing it because it lets me relive my life as a player and lets me go back and think of funny things that happened and the way baseball was played in those days was just completely different from the way it's played today. But it is entertaining.
For sure. Well,
hey,
I'm really impressed, and I know Bobby is too, that you figured out Zoom and you have a podcast. So congratulations. You're finishing up your baseball career in high style. Eddie, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Nice being on with
you. Yeah, thank your son too. All right, nice to meet you. It was an honor. Thank you again.
Okay, here's my son.
All right, what's going on, Mark? Thanks
you, Mark.
For helping us out, Mark.
Well done.
Excellent job.
Okay, thank
you,
guys.
It was an honor, we'll talk to you down the road, Eddie. Thank you.